Which brings me to our next session. So I'd like to invite Kasha and Alfred up to the stage, our next two panelists. And as they're coming up, I would like to say, first of all, these are two extremely remarkable individuals. I have known these two individuals for a number of years now. Alfred Breton is joining us from Quebec and is a senior clinical research associate at ICON Global Strategic Solutions. He holds a master's degree in physiology and endocrinology from Laval University and has worked in clinical research within the pharmaceutical industry since 2007. Alfred's son, LOI, was diagnosed with Duchenne at the age of 4, and since then, Alfred has been an active member in the Duchenne community and serves as a board member for Muscular Dystrophy Canada. Thank you, Alfred, for joining us today. And then we have Kasha, yes. And then we also have Kasha Mitton, who is joining us from Kamloops, British Columbia. Kasha is a registered nurse, clinical counselor, educator, wellness advocate, and proud mom dedicated to creating inclusion communities and driving change to those affected by Duchenne. She is also a yoga fitness instructor, and medication teacher. So, no.
I think that was meditation.
Meditation. There's a typo on my notes. Not a medication teacher, but a meditation teacher. Because she's not busy enough, this lovely lady. So without that, I'm going to stop talking and pass it over to my panelists. So Alfred, did you want to come first? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Nicola, for this nice introduction. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm glad that DP Duchenne Canada thought about us and and reuniting with Kasha as panelists. So it will be 14 years since we've learned about DMD for my son Eloi, and Maria, my wife, is also present here. It's the anniversary will be on the 18th of next month. So if you were telling me 14 years ago that my line of work in the pharma I could live the other side, I would have not told you. But of course, that at times it may have come handy, and so that's why I'm pleased to be here today. Whoops. Sorry about that. No. No. Oops. Sorry. Okay, good. So again, as mentioned by Nicola, I do work in the pharma industry. I'm a senior CRA, which for those who don't know, I am kind of the link between the pharma company and an investigational site to ensure that there's compliance with the protocol. So yes, I'm the person who, when your child is in a study, who is reviewing the data. And I just want to mention that the sponsor I'm assigned to is not involved in MD studies, and I'm only assigned to oncology. And in addition to being on the board of MDC, I'm very happy to be collaborating with DP Duchenne Canada as an avid advocate for clinical study. Of course, you may say that I'm biased to study, and that's true, but my aim when I advocate is for Canada to be selected as a country and for our families to have as many options should they want to consider participating in a study. And the good thing, I'm seeing way more and more, because even if I'm on the industry side, it still took me 5 years to find a study that could be, for which Eloi could be eligible to. And so that's why I wanted today to kind of present a perspective of what's happening on the pharma industry, and also what it is as a family to participate in, because and I often refer as a roller coaster, because it can be a mix of emotions when you are on a quest to find a study, and even when you are on a study. And even if everybody on both sides, we all know time is muscle, there's kind of a lot of deliverables that are needed before a study can be up and running. This is just a small list, but of course you need to have at least a final protocol that will make sense. Canada, of course, needs to be selected, and hopefully this is more and more the case because we have amazing clinicians and research teams here in the country. Some things that can take longer than usual is, contract budget with institutions. We need to have all the documents submitted to ethics and to Health Canada. Everybody at the site need to be trained. We have all the systems that are needed. And of course, we need to have medication on site at some point, which more often is manufactured in Europe or in the US. And once we have all these things approved and everything is ready, then screening can start. And usually the clinicians will have already pre-identified participants. But even when you sign a consent and everything, eligibility can take some time to be confirmed, and in some cases can take up to 6 weeks. And so it's still long until you have that first dose. And this is when, of course, the schedule of activities start, and that can be a very big commitment. In my experience, we can have weekly visits every 6 weeks for the first 6 weeks, and then twice a month and monthly. And so usually the first 6-7 months are quite demanding on the family. And even if the study is planned, a lot of things can happen, and I often refers to my sum of all fears because. And I know it happened to a lot of families. Sometimes there's delays in opening sites here, and that may equal for boys to age out of the eligibility criteria, or their change in functional tests also may remove them from being eligible as before. There could be a recruitment hold as well, just for safety, or when a country has reached its target. The screening can end prematurely. Let's say if a country recruit before Canada, and the ultimate is the termination of a study that can happen for lack of efficacy or safety, and a molecule can also be removed completely from development. And for the whole community, it's always tough. And if I may refer to the pandemic, I pick the example because I noticed at that time that the neuromuscular community, the research was not always considered essential, and that just exacerbated the difficulties we already facing, and some kind of a sense of deja vu because we're still seeing delays with change of guard, at the FDA, and just to give you an example, during the pandemic, I know families were waiting to have a study started, but at the same time, I was starting a study in rare form of renal cancer, and ironically, the standard of care for that cancer was clinical research. But outside, it's not always tough. What I'd like to share, and already previously shared with the industry, what made a difference when you're running a study. And the first thing would be, and I'm very grateful to the PIs and their research teams who kind of took a lead of faith on our family because, we weren't in their practice, and we were not even out of town, we were out of province. And of course, it involves a lot of traveling, but as Dr. McAdam mentioned, most, if not all, companies will facilitate and organize all the traveling for families, so you won't have to pay out of pocket to go to the sites. There's at-home visits also whenever it's possible. I've seen virtual reality facilitating MRI at times in some institutions. And yes, for me, research equals hope, but yes, there's placebo, which I sometimes consider as the current state, but it's changing. But for me, just the extra medical monitoring that you have, kind of the VIP treatment you have when you're in a study, that's totally worth it. And also, we're talking about patient centricity, patient's voice. I'm seeing, in our case, I've seen some studies not having just age as a criteria, but also more as a performance on the spectrum of the DMD. And also, I won't lie, it kind of gives you a sense of power when you start a new drug for your for your loved ones. And again, it was mentioned a lot. We've been supported by all the organizations that are listed here, and resources are there for you. So you use it if you want to consider and try to participate in a study. And finally, if there's some key takeaways that I could give you, if you want to make an informed decision, or at least that's the points I would like to discuss with the investigators, are first the options that are available right now. Is there other studies that we can choose? What would make more sense for us? Again, safety, of course, what's the kind of risk or the level of risk, and what's monitoring involved if we had to manage side effects. Of course, what's the schedule of activities? You know, what's the commitment and the time that it takes for the whole family? Is there, if there's a double blind, is there a possibility to cross over at some point or receive the real medication as part of an extension study? And if I take the example of gene therapy, what would be the implications of being in such kind of study? Because it's a one-time dosing and it cannot be undone. So that's certainly something that I would like to consider. So in the end, from my family to yours, thank you very much. And that's just an example of the yearly Heroes Climb we're doing for Eloi. And yes, I'm dressed in a turnout gear, but it's just in an honorary fashion. Thank you so much.
Wow, great job. I just want to thank Defeat Duchenne for having me. It's so great to connect with everybody again in person. I'm always so honored to be here. I recognize that it's late in the afternoon and you guys have had lunch, so the nurse in me is like, just move. Whatever you have to do to stay awake. You highlighted so many. I mean, I think we could spend a lot of time talking about this. This is a breadcrumb, and certainly if you have more questions, come in and find me. I'm happy to talk about any of this. I think it's hard. I think, you know, I've been in the healthcare system for over 20 years, so I've watched people and helped people journey through healthcare systems that are very complex. And I often say, as a mother who knows the questions to ask, I feel exhausted. So if you feel exhausted, I'm with you in that. And I know what questions to ask. I think when you become a parent, you think, I'm going to have to make decisions about what school they might go to or what sports they might play, but never in your life do you think, I'm going to have to make an informed decision about whether or not my child is going to enter a clinical trial. So I want to start off by just saying that I wish there was a guidebook for this, and unfortunately there isn't a guidebook for this. And I think one of the biggest things I've learned is to just stay curious and always ask questions and, you know, seek clarity. And I think we heard a lot of that today. I want to thank Dr. McAdam, actually, who talked about the humanness part of this, because as humans, we're not perfect. And we need to recognize that we're not human. I always say this when I'm teaching in healthcare. I say, we're human beings. We need to just be. We're not human doings. It's not always about what do I do next? What do I do? We're not check boxes. We're humans that have to just sit in all of the messiness of it. So I'm very happy to hear that that piece is starting to come in, because that really is person-centered care. There's duality that exists when you're thinking about going into clinical trials. There's grief and there's hope, and those two things can exist, so it's not either or. I think the desire to do everything possible and yet the worry of the unknown can coexist. And so as parents, we get really comfortable sitting in that discomfort, in that uncertainty of wanting to do, but also not knowing what that could look like. And, you know, each family's decision is personal. I think it's shaped by our values. what we hold is true. For some, there's a real sense of altruism that they want to give back to medical research, they want to advance, and for some, they want to hold the value of having safety and comfort, and less is more, and just having that that sense of being at home, right? And not knowing, and being very conservative in their decision making. So I just want to normalize that the decisions aren't as clear cut, which is why there's no guidebook for this. It's really guided by your internal value system as your family. And that will look different across the spectrum. I want to also acknowledge that when we're faced with the option of a clinical trial, we're not just deciding about a medication. And we heard that a lot today. It's also, we're deciding about time, we're deciding about energy, we're deciding about emotional bandwidth, we're deciding what our days will look like, what our months will look like, perhaps what our years will look like. And some families, they take this in, and these decisions, I think it's also important to highlight that these decisions will shift, that the only constant in life is change. And so we make the best decisions that we can with the information we have. And we also know that those decisions can and will change, and that that's okay too. I think there's uncertainty tolerance that we get really good at. There's, the impact on our parental identity. Am I making the best choice? What if I didn't make the best choice? These are the things that I hear parents say. These are the things I know I've heard myself say. And there can be a lot of guilt and a lot of pressure in that. So I'm just here to share that I have been through that. My son was diagnosed at the age of 4, and he was in a clinical trial within a week after diagnosis. But I will share that he was one of the first cohorts going through the vamorolone trial, and I was sharing with some of you today that when it came to fruition that drug got approved with Health Canada, I turned to him and I said, "You did this, buddy. You did this. This was all those trips on the airplanes, all the time, all the blood, all the tissue everything." And he looked at me and he goes, "I did?" And I said, "Yes, you're part of this. This is history in the making." And he says, "Cool." So there you go. So, but you think you don't know where this is going to lead, right? You don't know what this is going to lead. And everything changes. Data changes. Medicine changes. Information changes. That's why I love being in healthcare, because you'll never get bored. It will always change. And so I think one of the biggest things, nurses are known to be a little bossy, and we like to fix and do and tell people where they should go and how to get there. But what I learned in this process is to ask for help. And that is a really, really hard thing for me to do. And so I think as parents, when we think about entering a clinical trial, whether you decide to do it or you don't, make sure you know who your village is. Make sure you get really comfortable with asking. I would say thinking about not just your family, but who's outside of that, your broader community, even the school. Like now I'm always thinking ahead, what will my son miss? Can we be proactive in asking for help and what's ahead? So you're kind of always forecasting, right? You're always forecasting on what we can do. And I think those practical realities that were highlighted, how much time and travel is this going to take? Can I ask if we can fly instead of drive, because that'll save me a work day? These are things that you can go ahead and ask. What is the impact on siblings? We had a daughter that we left at home, and when my son was first enrolled, we were flying back and forth, every week across a province. So we had to think and consider that impact on the sibling in leaving her with family members and what that looked like. There's work and financial stressors, right? Leaving work, how do you manage that? What is the ripple effect of every family member? Because each family member, this will look different. The lived experience is different across the spectrum of the family. We talked about the procedural stuff. So thinking ahead, procedural anxiety is a real thing. I had to talk to my son about what was coming up with the appointments, what that would look like. If I could make it fun, I would. One of my tricks for blood draws would be, he was obsessed with superheroes. So I would say, hey, I wonder what superhero you're going to be. We'll find out when the blood color comes out, if it's blue or red. And even he was down at BC Children's a week ago, and he's a teenager now. He said, Mom, I'm still Spider-Man. So, you try to do the best with what you can. You try to make it fun. You try to make it an adventure. But we also recognize the psychological toll, and the importance of preparation and thinking and asking good questions and knowing who's on your team. I'll leave you with this. I mean, I could sit up here forever and talk about this, but one of my biggest take homes in how do we unburden the grief and the psychological toll that clinical trials and stuff can have, I've always come back to the circles of influence. And if you haven't learned about the circles of influence, I highly recommend. So 50% of the time we can't control things. I can't control whether it's raining outside. I can't control whether the Blue Jays win tonight or not, although I hope they do. 35% of the time we have some control. I can't control it's raining, but I can grab an umbrella. Maybe there's a traffic jam, but I'll ride my bike or walk. But 15% of the time we have full control, and that's how we show up, the questions we ask, how we look after ourselves. And so whoever talked about self-care, I think it was a social worker, thank you for that, because when you look at my history here, I've leaned very deeply into the self-care realm because I knew that I needed it, and that was going to be the tool in my tool kit to get me through. So how do we ground down? I learned grounding exercises for myself. I taught them to my son to help him, because we know stress doesn't produce clean data if we're going into a clinical trial. So how do we produce clean data? How do we keep stress levels down? And what is within our control? What can we do? So sometimes my mantra has been 15%, baby. That's all I can control. And so although we look ahead, I always say I try not to borrow sorrow from tomorrow and stay in today in what we can do, stay in the art of possibility, the hope of what is possible. And, anchoring in purpose, looking at, the here and now. And in the rush to fix, to plan, to protect, I think we can forget that our biggest gift is always not in the doing, but in the being beside our children and our family. How can we show up? And so whatever that looks like for you and how you can be the guide on the side, do that, because the answers aren't always clear. And we want them so bad, so the suffering ends up happening in wanting something other than what is now. So if we can just focus on what we have now, I think that's a big help. So I'll end it there. I know there's a lot more I could talk about, but I'm here. We're doing some coffee chats, which I'm really excited about, to connect with the parents. And just come and chat with me. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Kasha and Alfred. And can I just say, we are an extremely lucky community because we have some really incredible parents. This is really amazing. Thank you so much.